Hey, before this episode gets going, I wanted to apologize for the sound. So instead of this nice sound that you're hearing right now, it's going to sound more like this, which really is just an experiment so that you can understand the difference between a $150 shotgun mic and a $350 SM7B. So anyway, enjoy the show. Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, Election Day. So go cast a vote if you have not already. And on your way there or on your way back or both, you can jam out to this nerdy show in which we discuss certifications, farm do-overs, and November resolutions because that's a thing. So let's do it. All right, so my first week after soccer ends is always that weird feeling where I have time and capacity that I didn't have before. And instead of relaxing like a normal human being, I tend to fill it with more work. For the next month, it's all about planning and for the next season on the farm. And for the tree plantings that I've talked about, I hesitate to call it silvo-horticulture, and not just because the name remains painfully difficult for me to say aloud, but because the plan as of right now is only a handful of trees in the gardens themselves with a lot of space between them and the next bed. I want them to help with shade a little bit. I want them to help with the wind a little bit. I don't want them to fight me for garden space. But that is sort of the idea. Essentially, we are taking about half of our garden space out, give or take, of annual vegetable production and moving those plots into perennial fruit. The kinds that do well around here, such as pears, a few apple trees, some blueberries, stuff like that. And then a sampling of other things, some natives and that sort of stuff. That will still leave us with pretty substantial amount of annual growing space to focus on, maybe more the faster crops, less intensive crops, plus a handful of crops our neighbors and local customers like. And by local customers, I am definitely including me, my kids, and the wife, but also a couple restaurants and retailers. Also, like I've said, I'm going to be running quite a lot of trials this next year, so no shortage of the growing space will be dedicated to that as well. So it's a bit of a transition period for our farm where we are slowing down on the intensive annual vegetable production a bit and trying to make a more concerted effort to grow more perennials and, frankly, crops I can harvest standing up in the next 10 or 20 years as my back continues to decline from a lifetime of being a dummy. Which, as I said in one of the first episodes of this show, was more than likely a product of skateboarding than it was of farming. I'm usually pretty good about my back when it comes to lifting and bending. I'm not as good about my back when it comes to going back in time and telling my younger self to not run into the concrete when I fall down. Maybe like pillows would have been smart. Or like not skateboarding. The other big thing is that we're going to stop bothering with the organic certification more than likely, at least for now, for a few reasons. But largely for our sales outlets next year, the certification isn't really going to do all that much or be worth the amount of work it takes. That said, I will do a whole segment or possibly a whole special episode on how to decide if organic certification is for you soon. So make sure you're subscribed and following wherever you are hearing or watching this. Certifications are interesting though, and I saw this question on YouTube a while back that I thought might make a good point of discussion about this particular topic. It came from @goatsofwar7181, who wrote, quote, "We grow with no chems or pesticides, and this was our first season selling any produce. We also do meat chickens and got a permit to sell from the farm in Washington State. We advertise with clunky words like grow with no chemical fertilizers and no pesticides or locally grown." They go on to say, "I wish we had a label that producers created, like better than organic or hopefully something better than that. Do you think this would be worth the effort it would take to create a recognized label? It would take up less space on the label, if nothing else. I know that I grow the best possible probiotic and prebiotic whole food, and we fully realize the health benefits of eating such foods, but how do we communicate that to our customers?" End quote. So for those of you who want a label simpler than the organic label, there actually is one. It's Certified Naturally Grown, which in the name of full disclosure has been a sponsor of the podcast in the past. Certified Naturally Grown is a peer-to-peer, that is to say farmer-to-farmer label that still largely uses the organic certification standards, but is not quite as intensive as organic and farmers are the ones deciding whether or not you are qualified. Alternatively, I should say that for its many, many flaws, the organic label in a market setting can certainly be worth the work and money, at least for the moment. Do I hate that the organic certifiers allowed hydroponics in? Absolutely, I do. No disrespect to my hydro friends, truly, it's not easy to grow that way, but hydro should do their own thing. Hydro organic or something else. Field grown food and food grown through the detailed chemistry and sanitary conditions required of hydroponics are just not really anything alike. Not in their flavor, not in their potential to promote ecology, and not in their production. Hydroponics has somewhat poignantly, and I say this with love, watered down the organic label to the point that I don't blame a single customer who just throws up their hands and says like, I don't understand, because neither do most organic farmers. Another label I like in that vein though, and one customers should look out for, is the Real Organic Project certification. But you have to be organically certified first to qualify for Real Organic Project certification. Real Organic Project is basically an extension or add-on label, meaning if you are not already certified organic, you cannot be Real Organic certified. Again, full disclosure, Real Organic Project has also sponsored our work in the past, but that isn't that much of a surprise. There are not a ton of additional labels. And my farm is also ROP, Real Organic Project certified, or will have been all the way up until we do or don't drop our organic certification next year. What I love about that label, though, is that they turn the organic label into what we all want it to be, about ecology, about soil health, and continuous soil improvement. One of the things I appreciate about when they came to our farm for their inspection is that the inspector pulled my employee aside and asked them questions about the work environment and whether I was withholding their passport, for instance. Basically, they were trying to determine, am I abusing my employees? And I loved that. I love that level of detail and those standards. They care about the ecology all the way down to the people who steward it, and they do not allow hydroponics in. Real Organic Project certification. I genuinely wish ROP would completely take over the organic certification standards, because the way they are now, yes, there are a lot of really, really good organic growers, but you can also push it to the point when it's almost just slightly better than conventional. If I'm a customer, and sometimes I am, I'm looking for that Real Organic Project label. I don't see it very often, but it's the only thing that has us hesitating about remaining organic certified, is that we do like having that label. Anyway, to the question about starting a label, I don't know if it would work or if it would be necessary because, like I said, C&G already exists, and Real Organic Project, that takes organic to the level at which it should already be. We have joked about starting a no-till label in the past because that wouldn't be controversial at all. I see a value in labels from the customer standpoint, but enforcing restrictions is hard. Keeping deep pockets with vested interest out of it is hard. The impulse with any system that isn't working well is to tear it down and start from scratch, but be it a government or label, all systems take constant work and attention. All systems are going to be subject to corruption. All systems are the product of someone looking at the last system and saying, let's tear it down and start over, only to do all that work and then one day arrive in the same place the last system was. It's a bizarre cycle. It's like a farm. You can't just plant it and forget it. Yes, even like permaculture, there is constant maintenance required. Also, you can't just tear it all down and start over, i.e. till it every season and just completely switch to a new system. That will only lead to the same conclusion every year, that it's not working. It's got to be thoughtful and planned out and carefully executed. It's got to be managed and maintained. To mix some metaphors here, it could be like a sourdough starter or kombucha mother. You have to feed it and keep it alive. Anyway, I think all that had something to do with labels. Up next, let's get a question about those farm do-overs. BRB.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seeding to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. Their same-day shipping can help keep your planting schedules on track when the unexpected happens. They're here to help you grow good food. Turning to Johnny's means you can plant high-quality, trial-proven varieties with confidence and know that their expert staff is ready to help with first-hand knowledge, because they've grown them themselves. Learn more at johnnyseeds.com. All right, back to the show.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast and want to support it, you can do so at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Today's question comes from our friend, our beloved Dorcasaur, again, who writes, if you could start this farm over, what would you do different from the beginning, if anything? And I thought, since we are talking a bit about planning in the first segment and tearing systems down, why not talk a bit about planning failures in the second section? There are quite a few things I think I would have done differently on this new farm, though overall I'm generally happy with how the farm has come together. The first thing I wish that I had done was to really investigate the drainage better. When we saw and bought the property, it was the fall of 2020, and the weather was warm and dry, and the soil seemed healthy, and stuff was growing really well, which maybe should have been an indicator that there was a lot of residual moisture there. But nothing on the NRCS soil survey, which you should check out, tends to be very helpful, and I will link it in the show notes. Nothing in that survey indicated that the drainage would be an issue. Now, if I had talked to the neighbors about the soil or noticed the 3 ponds all around the farm, I may have been able to infer that in the wetter parts of the season, stuff stays wet. But I did not do that. I may have also caught the drainage issue earlier if I had done a percolation test and checked that way. One challenge, I should say, when buying a farm, though, is asking the current landowners if they mind if you dig a hole before you sign the contract. Especially in 2020 when farms were being gobbled up like winter carrots, you didn't want to put a bunch of contingencies in an offer. However, I don't think we would have not bought the house, apologies for that double negative there, but we would have bought the house and farm regardless because it had everything else we needed. And I can work with poor drainage if I know it exists, but I did not set up our gardens for that poor drainage because they're on a slope, and what the heck is poor drainage doing on a slope anyway? Doesn't it know how annoyingly abnormal that is? That's one mistake I wish I could take back, not investigating the soil drainage well enough. Another mistake is that I tried a bunch of different styles of never-till that were all largely a waste of a growing season. If you're ever wondering why I'm so often mildly antagonistic toward the idea of never-till, especially on poor and compacted clay in a wet climate, it's because I haven't just seen it fail once. I've seen it fail multiple times with multiple different strategies. Lasagna beds, deep compost mulch, and deep hay mulch on 2 different soil types. All of those approaches took multiple seasons to really get into decent production. I wish in those plots I had simply put some good amendments and compost down and then worked them into the soil, built the beds, and then covered them with mulch, and then I can start a really good no-till garden that I never have to till again. Again, I'm not saying never-till can't work. It definitely can. I'm saying it did not work here on the compacted, mucky, poorly draining clay I have. Good silty loam or maybe sand, you're probably good to go. But even then, I would take my time investigating what the soil needs before making that decision. There are probably other little things I wish I had done as well. But a lot of what we did or didn't do great were not the product of doing the wrong thing. They were just a product of the budget that we had to start a new farm. I would love to have put in a really advanced automated irrigation system right from the jump. I would love to have put in electricity out to the tunnels before we built them. So I guess in that way, one mistake was just not spending enough time building startup capital to start yet another farm. Another mistake that I didn't make, but almost did, was really installing all the perennials and native plantings I want. I think people, including myself, get really excited about getting that stuff in as quickly as possible so that, we can take advantage of it as quickly as possible. But I also think there's something to be said for learning your property fully before really diving into the perennial stuff. Like, I know the areas where we are planting the trees this year really well in a way that I could not have known them in 2020 when we bought this new property. That's a mistake we didn't make, but we certainly could have. Of course, if enough time is spent on site design, a lot of the issues can be avoided or mitigated as your farm grows. So if I learned one thing, it's that whenever you think you've got your plan down, you're about halfway there. Ask some more questions, do some more digging, literally and figuratively, and really investigate. I always felt that same way when I was doing more journalism. Once the piece feels done, call one more source. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's resolve some things. Be right back.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to be in the field growing food for my community, not creating elaborate pack lists, not writing newsletters or responding to emails, not designing and maintaining web stores, and etc. And I especially don't enjoy doing those things after an already full and fulfilling day of growing food. Actually, if I spent less time on my phone and behind the computer, that would be great. If only there were a solution for that. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for farmers. With one single platform, Farmhand enables you to offload your administrative tasks, send and manage communications, and sell more to your customers. Farmhand saves growers an average of 6 hours of administrative load each week. That's 6 hours so you can get back into the field, spend more time with friends or family, or have a life outside of the farm, which is actually a thing. Think about it. What would you do with an extra 6 hours a week? Sign up for a free trial with the link in the show notes, because now is the best time to dial in those systems for the next growing season. Follow the Farmhand link in the show notes to learn more. All right, back to the show.
Okay, so farmers and gardeners and everyone really need to exercise. We do. It seems counterproductive because our work is so much exercise, but it's good for our health, both mental and physical. It's good for our longevity, again, both mental and physical. And it keeps us in shape and ready for the spring. And honestly, the most energy I ever have is when I'm doing exercising and farming at the same time. I feel like it really increases my endurance. But in my opinion, starting in January 1st as a resolution, clearly I've not fully recovered my voice from the coaching weekend, but starting January 1st as a resolution is a little bit too late. One, depending on how active your fall and winter is, you may end up losing a lot of the good work you've put into your physical health over the growing season between the end of the season and the first of the new year. Two, putting so much pressure on a New Year's resolution all but ensures it fails. I mean, that's not technically true, but New Year's resolutions failure rates are incredibly high, with some surveys suggesting 80% of people who start a resolution stop by February, though I should say the studies on New Year's resolutions are not exactly robust and numerous, so take that statistic somewhat with a grain of salt, unless you're avoiding salt as a resolution, maybe with a grain of pepper. I don't know if that's a thing. So for me, I like to start my resolutions, which is just generally to stay in shape, in November and not January. It's low pressure to succeed, and I can set a specific goal of just simply exercising 4 to 5 times a week for 30 to 60 minutes a day, all the way until the season starts in March. That to me is an achievable goal, and I can just mark the days off when I succeed. Like I said, the research on New Year's resolutions is not plentiful, but there was at least one good study on resolutions that I found. That this one found people were more successful with the resolutions when the resolutions they set were approach-oriented, meaning focusing on what they wanted to achieve, versus avoidance-oriented. That would be like focusing on what they want to avoid, like a certain type of food or smoking or excessive tillage. So like maybe you want to lose weight or put on muscle or simply maintain what you've already got. All of that can be set as a goal. It's easier than saying, I'm just going to quit doing X, which has a higher failure rate according to that research. Anyway, all that to say, I'm resolving to start my basic workouts this first full week of November, and hope you all will join me. Yoga, calisthenics, an exercise bike, whatever makes sense for the space and time that you have can be a good addition to your life. So beat the crowds and get a jump on those resolutions, because it's just as important to start preparing our gardens for the next season as it is to start preparing our bodies. And like we talked about in the first segment, it's easier to maintain something than it is to tear the whole thing down and start again from scratch by sitting around all winter. Let me know where you have found the best home exercise advice, because I am always looking for new inspiration. I find it's easier for me to keep things fresh and try new stuff than to try and rehash the old routines, because oftentimes I'm comparing where I stopped those routines to where I'm starting now. And sometimes I think that would work for some people. For me, it's discouraging or something. So I don't often do it that well. So I'm looking for new routines this year. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up there. Maybe we can start a little thread over at the forum at no-tillgrowers.com to give people a place to check in. Anyhow, huge thanks to Willie Breeding for the theme song. Thank you to the crew at No Till Growers for their support. Thank you to everyone who has been listening and engaging and subscribing and following, and especially those who have moseyed over there to the Patreon page to sign up, where, at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or if you just sign up in the month of November, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, our friend Wish I Started 20 Years Ago. You get multiple shout outs at certain tiers. And next year, you're going to have to change your name to Wish I Started 21 Years Ago. I just want to make sure, does it change every year? I don't know. Dwight Yoder, Honey Works, Steve Hurlbut, Rebecca S., Mark Ravenel, Doug Wilkes, Lee Shelley, Hank Zecca, Tyler Rollins, Kat Brannigan, one of my favorites, Kat, love saying that name. DP, designated player, that's a big thing in Major League Soccer, it's important, glad you're with us. Lionel Messi's a DP, it's important. Martian Cindy, Spencer Carter, Larry Shepard, Brian McCarthy, Ashley Sharp, Jill Crosby, Scott Roser, Norsk Guard Farm, Lori Britton, yep, Joseph Sanguinetti, Alex Savatsky, PTHF, Alberto Diaz, Jason Ruel, Scott Harris, Earth Care Farmer Jane Murner, Derek Page, Meredith Light from Granite Springs Farm, Grown Up Farm, Bob and Ann Patton of Hexhamshire Organics. What's up, Bob and Ann? Love their farm. Jared Kirst at Rivendell Farm, Dan Brisebois. Make sure to get his book, The Seed Farmer. You can pre-order it, No-Till Growers. Dan's awesome. Steve Larson, Fiona and Donnie of Firefly Farm, and Jen Lawrence. I've ended so many of these Patreon shoutouts with the name Jen Lawrence. It's just like a exclamation point at the end of all of my reads. So thanks, Jen. You're an exclamation point. You've earned it. All right. Love to everyone on this lovely election day. I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching or listening.